Hi everyone. This video lecture will take you through the first part of chapter 1 of technically the Environment and You textbook, but for those of you who are not using a textbook this semester, it'll help take you through it without the textbook. So the environment, what does it encompass? Physical, chemical, and biological factors that all of those factors determine the growth and survival of an organism or a community of organisms. What is environmental science? Well, it's the study of all aspects of the environment. It's an interdisciplinary study of the environment. I was an environmental science major and I loved every minute of it. And the reason for that is I didn't have to cover one specific topic. I could take courses across a wide range of topics and still gain an understanding of the common concepts. So when I was in undergrad, I took classes in policy, I took classes in ecology, marine biology, hydrogeology, aquatic ecosystems. So there was tons of classes that I took, botany, ornithology, the study of birds. So there were tons of classes that I took across a wide range. We all had definitely general eds, but I had a wonderful kind of, I guess, path through all the different topics that are covered in environmental science. So if you are somebody who doesn't like to just study one thing, but likes to have a broad range of topics, environmental science may be for you. Ecology is one of those underlying sections of environmental science, and ecology just studies the abundance and distribution of organisms. So when I was in my ecology classes, we would go out into the woods, we would draw, we would have quadrants, and we would have to count species in those quadrants. We have to know what species they are, why they were there, what was affecting those species, all of those sorts of topics. So the ecology is looking at those population distributions, why they function, and why there may be issues with them. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about environmental science and our views on the environment, where they started, where they've headed, etc. So our ideas about how we use resources have definitely changed over time. Of course, this is largely determined by our needs or our perceived needs. The Earth's forest resources appeared to have been abundant years ago. Species seemed to be abundant years ago, and then over time, we've learned that things are not endless. That resources are finite and do come to an end. So, for example, when we talk about the American bison, or we talk about mammoths, or other species that we thought were so abundant, and now we realize, oh my gosh, they're on the brink of extinction. I just heard the other day a wonderful story about the giraffe and how the giraffe population has significantly decreased, and that it's silently going extinct. So what we think is an abundant amount of giraffes actually really aren't. And so now we've realized, we really need to take care of what we have. So we have the Endangered Species Act. We have people protecting our resources and our needs and management. I cannot say that we're doing a great job at it, but I can say that we are somewhat aware of what we have available to us and how that is diminishing. So here's a great image. This is kind of what the land used to look like before. And when we talk about preservation and conservationists in the next chapter, and we talk about the Hetch Hetchy Dam, etc., it looked like this vast wilderness. And then what happened is we dammed the river, and we created a reservoir, and we changed the entire landscape. So a lot of times these images have been put in our brains from both readings, postcards, a lot of images such as this, that it was this vast wilderness. And now those images have changed a little bit as we have moved on. So managing resources. How do we manage resources? Well, resources are dwindling. Behaviors have changed. The one positive thing is scientific studies have increased. So using the scientific method, looking at how many resources we have, what we have available. And what this led to, those scientific studies led to knowledge. That knowledge that we got from those scientific studies led to management. So we were able to create forests are replanted now. So, if you buy anything that's paper orientated, you'll see the the FSC, which is, the Forest Sustainability Council. And what is that? It means that paper is come from sources where they cut down a specific amount of forests and then they replant those forests because they realized, if we cut down all the forests, we're not going to have any paper, so our company's going to go out of business. Fisheries, there's catch limits, stocking lakes. Instead of freshwater fish, we now have all these lakes where we farm raised fish and other shrimp and any other seafood we have. Now, of course, there's all drawbacks to that as well. Is that, the species in the ocean have significantly decreased over the years. We have plastic pollution, so there's a lot of problems, but we are aware of these problems, which, remember, if you're aware of something, then you can change it. If you're not aware of it, you can't change it. So, in the 1950s, now we have a conflict for resources. In the 1950s, the population was 152 million people in the United States. This has significantly increased, and there was about 2.5 billion people worldwide. Today, we have reached the 7 billion mark worldwide. So this is, we have boomed as a population, which means we use more resources. And this is a big problem, is that as the population of the world continues to increase, we are going to reach a carrying capacity number. Carrying capacity is the amount of resources that are needed to have a population survive. So we need to stay below that carrying capacity number. If we overshoot that carrying capacity number, we're going to see deaths, lack of food, lack of water, lack of resources. So what happens is then that population dies back again. So we have to keep our eyes on that. So remember, after World War II, placed growing demands on national forests and public lands. So there was a huge boom in the population after World War II. That's where the baby boomer population came from. They're about in their 60s and 70s now. And so a lot of people had babies after World War II, and the population of the United States expanded. So there's been a lot. And so what have we done? Well, we've instituted a lot of policies to address the conflicts of use. So what we have done is we've put policies in effect for Clean Drinking Water, Clean Air Act. There's a lot of different acts out there. But the big issue is what are our basic needs versus our long-term interests? So when we look at this, we need to have resources for our basic needs, good health, of course, which would create social stability. But when do we prevent people from having those resources that infringes upon their personal freedoms? So, for example, everyone has access to water 24/7, but at what point does the water bills, if people can't pay them, do they cut their water off? Because water is a basic need. It keeps people in good health. It has social stability, but the problem is are we infringing upon people's personal freedom, which is they should have right and access to clean drinking water and food. So there's lots of questions about this as we move forward. So this is just, I love this image. It just shows how many people live throughout the world, and this is a wonderful image of light, and you can see throughout the world where people are distributed throughout the world. And look at the United States right here on the East Coast, and this, one of the big issues is that a lot of, like, my children will never see, unless I take them somewhere where there's less light pollution, they'll never be able to see stars the way that I know stars, where you can actually reach out and touch them. So what's one way that we can help the environment and help sustain it for the future? Well, sustainability. So what sustainability means is maintaining the ability to accommodate three important resources of change. So we're able to sustain for the future. The world is changing. We have to know that environments are under constant change. We have to understand that we are changing. Technology changes our needs for ecosystem systems, and that we are a changing world. Okay? So in order to be sustainable, we need to make sure we keep these ideas in mind. Okay? And sustainability includes three major portions: a people portion, a profit portion, and of course, a environmental portion to it. So what we need to do is meet the needs of the present in an equitable and fair fashion without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So we really need to look at this. What can we use now but still leave enough for future generations, and keep in mind the advances that they're going to have in technology and other things in the future? So for example, my generation, I'm Generation X, my generation is really is a different generation because we were the first ones to have access to computers on a global scale. I got my first email address when I was in college. And so we're the first generation to see this explosion of technology. And technology, don't forget, requires resources. So it requires the mining of specific metals so that we can create our motherboards and our hard drives, etc. And so my generation's the first one to realize, oh my gosh, do I really need all these plugins that are disposable, meaning that every device I get comes with a different charging device? Why can't we just have one universal charging device instead of having every time I buy something I have 75 wires that comes with it? So my generation's starting to see like, wow, there's this huge boom, but we can do better and we can fix that. So what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is all the organisms and their physical and chemical environments. And this includes both what we call the biotic or biota and the abiotic factors. So the biotic factors and the abiotic factors. Biotic factors are the living organisms, the plants, the animal, the bacteria, anything that's living. The abiotic factors are the non-living elements of the environment. So you're talking about water, temperature, minerals, things that aren't living. So you need to make sure you know these two terms. We have to remember that ecosystems are integrated systems. They are systems of living and non-living parts and processes. For example, bacteria converting nitrogen so plants can use it. And remember that energy and matter must flow in and out of these systems. So the water cycle, the carbon cycle. There are these cycles, the hydrogen cycle. There are these cycles that continuously cycle through. And if we break those cycles, then we break the process. So for example, if the water cycle stopped today, meaning water wasn't evaporating from the oceans, it wasn't raining in specific places, we would be in a lot of trouble because the water from the ocean is recirculated back onto land again. That land water then runs off back into the oceans again. It replaces each other. And there's energy that comes in and out of those systems. Here's a really good image of it. So you have inflow, sunlight, and materials like carbon and nitrogen into the environment. They're transformed into energy and materials that we can use, and then they come out as heat materials like carbon, nitrogen, etc. So they're converted and then they come out. Okay, and then what comes out then can get put back into the ecosystem again. Notice this is a closed loop system. So what goes in is transformed. What comes out, notice same words like carbon, nitrogen, water, like carbon, nitrogen, and water. This gets put right back in here. So it's not a linear system. It's a closed loop system that keeps going. Of course, we need to talk about ecosystems. There's huge ecosystems. For example, a continent is considered an ecosystem. You could go in your backyard and draw a tiny little square, and that's an ecosystem. So ecosystems can be huge, and they can be really, really small, okay? And so I want you to take a look at this. So here's an ecosystem, the Great Lakes, and then here's another ecosystem, which is the entire world as a whole is an ecosystem. The one thing, though, I want you to remember here is ecosystems behave differently with and without humans. And it's very hard to find ecosystems and how they're affected without humans anymore. It's really, really difficult to see that. One more thing I'm going to do, and then this will be the end of part 1, and I'll make a part 2 of this, so this video will continue in the second part. Ecosystems provide humans with many services, so we need to remember that ecosystems provide us with things: provisioning services, regulating services, cultural services, and supporting services. And here is really good examples of each one of those. So ecosystem services, food, climate, cultural, aesthetic, beauty, recreation, and supporting soil formation, pollination, etc. Humans' well-being, the basic needs for a good life, social, good social relations, freedom of choice and action, and then the change drivers, land use, species introductions and removal, technology, etc. So ecosystems provide us with all of these different things, especially these provisioning, regulating, cultural, and supporting services. And the next couple slides will take you through the basics of each one of those. So this is the end of part one. I will bring you back to finish part two of this video.